Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. And this is a fascinating one. Texas A&M at Miami, Saturday, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Texas A&M is a 4.5-point favorite. The over-under in this game is set at 51. I'll tell you what, two teams that entered the year both looking for positive momentum. Two teams both coming off 5-7 seasons. Two teams that admittedly played inferior competition on week one, but both looked really, really, really good. Texas A&M, listen, I know it was only New Mexico, but game one of the Bobby Petrino era, I think it has to be considered a success. He said all offseason, he said, our goal, I don't have an offense. My offense is get the ball in my playmakers' hands and let them make plays. Well, that is exactly what he did last week against New Mexico. Evan Stewart, the 5-star. Was he going to stay? Was he going to go? Was he happy? Was he unhappy? 8 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns for Evan Stewart. Noah Thomas, 6 catches in that game. Anaya Smith coming back from injury. Moose Muhammad, 3 catches apiece. So Texas A&M, they did their part. But I think the most telling stat for Texas A&M, 52 points in that game for the Aggies as they take care of business against New Mexico. And I know what everyone say, oh, it's New Mexico. Who cares? Well, here's the stat that you need to know. Texas A&M last year, they didn't score 40 points in a single game last year. A single game. Put up 31 in an ugly win against Sam Houston in week 1. 13 against App State in week 2, the game that basically melted down the internet. Put up 52 in week 1. That is a pretty solid opening performance for Bobby Petrino. And again, I get it. Everyone's going to say it. We haven't seen what is it like, what happens in the fire in a big moment between him and Jimbo Fisher. What happens? We'll see maybe this weekend. From the Miami perspective, I thought it was much the same, right? So Texas A&M, it was about getting the ball to playmakers. For Miami, remember Mario Cristobal, former offensive line coach, former offensive lineman. His goal is to control the line of scrimmage, beat people up. They prioritize the offensive line in both recruiting and the transfer portal. Added Javion Cohen, the starting guard from Alabama, to their offensive line. Added Matt Lee, an all-conference center from Central Florida. Added Francis Mauigoa, I believe is how you pronounce his name. 5-star, top 10 prospect. They wanted to reestablish the line of scrimmage, and that is exactly what they did last Friday night against Miami of Ohio. Again, get that it's Miami of Ohio. Get that you don't want to make too many sweeping takeaways from that game. But if you want to control the line of scrimmage and prove that you are big and bad up front, well, guess what? This was a heck of a way to do it. 250 yards rushing, 7 yards per carry. Henry Parrish Jr., 9 carries for 90 yards in that game. Mark Fletcher, a true freshman, 9 carries, 76 yards with a touchdown. What's interesting about this one, as we start talking about the game itself, in theory, these two teams are actually their strengths are going up against the other team's weakness. And what do I mean by that? Well, Miami last year, if you know anything about Miami, they really struggled in a lot of different categories, but they were especially bad against the pass. Remember, what did Texas A&M want to do? Texas A&M, get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. Well, last year, Miami, 233 yards per game allowed passing. That was 79th in the country. Overall, 64th nationally in total defense. And then from the Miami perspective, this to me is very interesting. Texas A&M a year ago was very bad against the run, was very bad against any physicality up front. 122nd nationally, giving up 208 yards per game rushing. And so I look at this game, and on the one hand, I could believe it or not, and we haven't said this very often about many Texas A&M games, I could see it going over. I could see both teams trying to do what they want to do and establish what they want to establish. A&M getting the ball to their playmakers, Miami running between the tackles. And I could see both of them having success. But the reality is I don't see both teams having success. And here is my pick for this game. I actually like Texas A&M to win outright and Texas A&M to cover. And again, I know, oh, Torres, he just loves Texas A&M. No. But what I do think is a few things here when it comes to this game. One, I mentioned the revamped offensive line for Miami going against a defensive front for Texas A&M that was not good last year. I also think some context matters here. One, Texas A&M had a ton of injuries up front. And Texas A&M, by the way, had to play all of those young guys last year. And so I thought it was very interesting from my perspective, watching the Texas A&M New Mexico game last Saturday. If you watch the game, Louis Riddick was the color commentator on that. Louis Riddick is awesome at what he does. I think he's one of the best NFL analysts or football analysts going. Again, he was the color commentator on that game. Why do I bring it up? He mentioned repeatedly, and I know it's New Mexico. I get it. How he mentioned repeatedly, though, how more put together and mature that young group along the defensive front was. Walter Nolan, if you watch that game, jumped off the page. Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker looked really good. Shamar Turner looked really good. A lot of guys, a lot of bodies. Damani Richardson at linebacker looked really good. A lot of guys flying around. In the secondary, Josh DeBerry looked really, really, really good. And I bring it up because I know that offensive line should be a strength for Miami. But I do wonder this. They say, the football experts say, offensive line is the most difficult place to get cohesion quickly. In other words, quarterbacks can kind of work with their wide receivers all summer and figure it out. But the offensive line, it takes time and it takes experience and it takes games together. Look at Colorado. Even Colorado last week, the offensive line wasn't very good, but Shedeur Sanders was so good at getting the ball out of his hands that didn't end up mattering. And so I look at this Miami offensive line. I think they can gel by the end of the year. I also think it's a big ask for them to be ready for this defensive front, this many bodies, this early in the season, even at home. Two, I'll also say this. I think that Miami isn't where Texas A&M is in terms of the quick fix rebuild. Now, to be clear, we know fixes can happen really quick in the portal era. Colorado this year, maybe Auburn, USC last year, LSU last year, TCU last year. But when I look at Miami, what stands out to me, last year they weren't even competitive, right? So Texas A&M, everybody crushes Texas A&M. They went 5-7. But here's the thing. Of their 7 losses, I think most people know the stat. 5 were by a touchdown or less for Texas A&M. Miami, 5 of their 7 losses were by double figures a year ago. And you look at who Miami beat in 2021, it was not pretty for the Miami Hurricanes. This is who Miami ended up beating last year on their way to 5-7. Bethune-Cookman, Southern Miss, Virginia Tech, admittedly that was on the road, Virginia, and at Georgia Tech. And then they lost 7 games, 5 of them by double figures. And so I don't know that they're that close yet. I worry about the O-line holding up. And finally, I don't generally love taking big underdogs on the road, or big favorites on the road, excuse me. But I look at this game and I ask, is it really going to be that difficult of a road environment? Did you see this? Miami is giving out buy one, get one free tickets for this game. In other words, you buy a ticket to this game, you get a free ticket to another game later in the year. And as a guy who grew up on the late 90s, early 2000s Miami Hurricanes, it boggles my mind that they cannot fill that stadium. And I know Miami's a fair weather town and all that good stuff. I think the knocking down the Orange Bowl, the move to Hard Rock Stadium, I have driven through there. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's not easy to get to. I think it hurts this team. And the buzz is Texas A&M is going to bring a lot of fans down there this weekend. And so I could go on and on, but I do like Texas A&M to win. I do like them to cover. I think probably in the range of what I said for Texas, Alabama, 31-20, something like that as a final score. I'll stay away from the over under, and I will strictly take Texas A&M outright.